Marissa sat alone on her patio, gazing out over the skyline as the last traces of daylight melted away. The city buzzed with life below her, neon lights flickering on, casting soft glows across the street. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her, fingers tracing the edges as her thoughts spiraled back to Marco, and to Patrick, her husband. She had married Patrick 10 years ago, and he was everything a woman could ask for: steady, good-hearted, loving. But their life had become predictable, her days blurring into one another. The life they shared felt safe, like a well-worn path through familiar woods, but Marissa yearned for something different. Lately, she couldn't shake the feeling that her dreams had dwindled along with her youth. Then, 6 months ago, she'd met Marco. He had said to her at a gallery fundraiser one evening, his gaze intense, his hand resting on the small of her back.
Paris. Come with me to Paris next weekend. Let me show you what life can be.
She'd felt her heart flutter at his words, sensing a thrill she hadn't felt in years. Marco, 15 years her senior, was magnetic, unpredictable, wealthy. His life was one of grand gestures and whispered secrets, a world she could only imagine. He made her feel vibrant, new, desired. And tonight, she was supposed to be on a plane with him. Her suitcase sat at her feet, her passport slipped into the side pocket of her purse. She had made a decision, or so she thought. But as she sat there, Patrick's face drifted into her mind. She could hear his soft laughter, remember his hand resting on hers at breakfast that morning as he'd said,
"You seem distracted lately. Is everything okay?"
She had only smiled, avoiding his gaze. How could she tell him what she didn't fully understand herself? That this pull toward Marco felt as essential as her desire for the life they'd built? A message from Marco flashed on her phone. "I'm at the airport lounge, ready for our adventure. Think of the Seine. Think of all the doors waiting to be opened, with you." She closed her eyes, feeling torn. As much as she craved escape, guilt gnawed at her. Patrick would be coming home soon, expecting to find her waiting with his favorite dinner prepared, as she'd promised. Would he be able to sense her distance? Her phone buzzed again, but this time it was Patrick, running a little late. Might take the long route home, wanted to pick up some flowers. "Just for you." She felt a pang, a twinge that twisted her heart. She could imagine his face, the soft, tender smile that had been hers alone all these years. She knew his kindness, his steady love, his unwavering loyalty. She heard the familiar jingle of keys, and her heart raced as the front door creaked open. Patrick was home.
"Marissa?"
His voice called out, gentle, searching. She drew in a shaky breath. "Now or never."
"Here,"
she replied, and he appeared in the doorway, holding a modest bouquet of her favorite tulips, wrapped in brown paper. His face lit up as he looked at her, his gaze soft, filled with a love she knew well but didn't deserve tonight.
"I just thought you might like these."
He offered them to her, his fingers brushing hers.
"Patrick,
She began, her voice faltering. He glanced down, noticing the suitcase at her feet, her purse with her passport peeking out. His gaze followed hers, and slowly, the color drained from his face.
"What's this?"
His voice was barely a whisper. She forced herself to meet his eyes.
I was going to go Patrick. With Marco."
The words hung in the air between them, thick with tension, disbelief, and hurt. He took a step back, his hand dropping to his side, the bouquet of tulips forgotten on the floor.
"For how long?"
"I don't know. I felt like maybe I needed something more than this. Than us."
Patrick nodded slowly, absorbing each word as though it were a blow. He drew in a sharp breath.
Did you even plan to come back?
She looked down, silent, unable to answer. After a long pause, Patrick took a step forward, a tear glistening in his eye.
Marissa, I've given you everything I am. This home. This life. I've trusted you. And I thought you were happy.
I thought I was too. But maybe I need something different.
Patrick stared at her, his face etched with heartbreak. He opened his mouth to say something, but stopped himself. Instead, he gave a small, defeated nod.
Well, if you need more, I can't stop you.
They stood in silence, each weighed down by the rawness of the moment. She clutched her suitcase, feeling the unfamiliar weight of her own choices.
Goodbye, Patrick.
She managed, a tear slipping down her cheek. He nodded, his voice barely audible.
Goodbye, Marissa.
She left the apartment and took a taxi to the airport, where Marco was waiting in the lounge, his smile welcoming and warm. But as they boarded the plane and she looked out the window, her heart sank. She pictured Patrick sitting alone in their apartment, the bouquet of tulips left on the floor. In Paris, Marissa soon found herself in places she'd only dreamed of, swept into Marco's world of luxury and opulence. But there was a coldness lurking beneath the thrill. Each night, as they dined in fine restaurants or explored art galleries, Marco's charm felt slightly hollow, rehearsed, his gaze lingering a little too long on other women, his attention shifting unpredictably. He always had an excuse to check his phone, sometimes stepping away to take a call. When she asked, he only smiled and said,
"Business, darling."
Days passed, and Marissa's enthusiasm began to wane. She realized that Marco was nothing like Patrick, who would have laughed with her over a small meal or taken a silly photo just to make her smile. With Marco, it was all grand gestures and distant moments. She had traded warmth for the thrill, only to discover the thrill was beginning to feel empty. One evening, they attended a masquerade ball at an elegant chateau. She watched Marco glide through the room, seamlessly charming everyone around him. But as the night wore on, he seemed to fade from her reach. In a private moment, she asked,
Marco, why did you want me to come here with you?
He looked at her with mild surprise, his response dispassionate.
Why wouldn't I? You're lovely, Marissa. And you wanted to experience life. This is life, isn't it?
But it didn't feel like life to her, it felt like a performance. She excused herself early and wandered the grand halls alone, her heart aching. Late that night, back in the hotel room, Marissa overheard Marco on a call. He spoke in hushed tones, but she caught words that pierced through.
Just a fling. Yes, she's here now, but it's not serious. You know me, I never get attached.
A chill washed over her, the painful clarity of what she'd truly chosen. As Marco ended the call, she pretended to be asleep. Her heart pounded, her mind racing. Was this the man she'd left Patrick for? She was no more than an exciting diversion, a temporary fixture in Marco's life. The weight of her decisions settled heavily on her chest, the allure of Paris slipping away. The next morning, while Marco was away at a meeting, she packed her things quietly, a resolve building within her. She could barely breathe through her regret, but she had to try to make things right. There was only one place she wanted to be now. With shaking hands, she booked a flight home. She didn't know if Patrick would forgive her, or if she even deserved his forgiveness, but she had to face him, to own the hurt she'd caused. Hours later, she found herself standing outside their apartment door. She knocked softly, her heart in her throat. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Patrick, looking exhausted, his eyes shadowed with hurt. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Finally, Marissa spoke, her voice breaking.
Patrick, I made a terrible mistake. I thought I wanted something else, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to come back.
He was silent, his face unreadable. She could see the pain in his eyes, but there was a flicker of hope too, faint but real. After what felt like an eternity, he sighed, stepping aside to let her in.
You broke my heart, Marissa. But you're here now, and maybe, just maybe, we can find a way through this.
Tears filled her eyes as she stepped inside, realizing that, despite everything, he was willing to try. Marissa realized that sometimes the life we think is ordinary is the one that truly makes us whole.